You're all very local, based in New York City, which is fantastic, greatest city in the world and all that. But what I want to talk about is something global. All right, give it a shout out for New York City. Let's do it. Come on, New York. Exactly. Well, I want to talk about something global today, something that affects the 7 billion people who live on this planet, and that's the Sustainable Development Goals. You'll see it up there. Show it to every single person you know, because we want you to be evangelists for the 17 Development Goals. Well, the idea of sustainable development is we don't just care about money and economic growth and wealth. We also care about whether we're taking care of each other and whether we're taking care of the planet. That's the simple version of sustainable development. So it's economic growth, yes, but it's also decency, it's also fairness, and it's also sustainability. All the things that I know you care a lot about today. We're not communists. We say, yes, you can create wealth, no problem with that, but it's not just about creating wealth, it's how you create it and what you do with it that matters. And that's the essence of the Sustainable Development Goals. These 17 goals were endorsed by all nations of the world, all 193 nations of the world, in September 2015, right here in New York City. And then in December 2015, 3 months afterwards, the nations all gathered in the world for a second time in Paris to endorse the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, which is one of the most important agreements in your lifetimes. I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. And that's absolutely crucial. These Sustainable Development Goals are a really big deal. They're really important. And if you don't mind me getting a little cheesy, I'm going to quote from the musical Hamilton. We got some Hamilton fans? If you're Hamilton fans, you're going to like what I'm doing. Look around, look around. Look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now, at this moment in sustainable development. So let's look at the Sustainable Development Goals. Goal 1 is end poverty in all its forms by 2030. Eradicate extreme poverty. There is something like 800 million people in the world today living in extreme poverty, which is usually defined around less than $1.25 a day. That's really, really tough, and it's kind of scandalous that that exists. Think about it. That's 2.5 times the population of the United States living in extreme poverty right now in the world somewhere today. And we commit to eradicate that by 2030. The second goal is related to it, zero hunger. End hunger, achieve food security and better nutrition, like some of you have been saying already today, and sustainable agriculture, all the stuff you're working on. We know there's almost 1 billion people today going hungry. Another billion might not be hungry, but they're lacking those vital micronutrients that are crucial for good nutrition. And another 1 billion people in the world are obese. So 3 billion people in the world out of 7 billion have some kind of food problem. At the same time, 30 to 40% of all the food we produce is wasted. The third goal is health. Ensure healthy lives and well-being for all. Here's a statistic which is going to stun you. 6 million children under 5 years old die every year from diseases. 6 million. Almost every single one of those children could be saved for very, very simple costs. Things like vaccination, basic preventive health care. This is a moral travesty, and this is something the Sustainable Development Goals are really, really focused on. Ending these deaths from health, ending epidemics of AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, and other tropical diseases. Are you okay with this? No. Then let me quote Hamilton again. We'll never be truly free until those in bondage have the same rights as you and me. Hamilton was talking about slavery, but you can have slavery to poverty. You can have slavery to hunger. These are all different forms of bondage that we as human beings must eradicate. The fourth one is education. Ensure inclusive education for every child, every young adult all across the world. Now in secondary school, which is at the level you're at, only about 70% of children in the world today can go to secondary school. So 3 in 10 kids can't go because they can't afford it or it's not available. This is wrong. We all know how important education is, how crucial it is if you want to have a level playing field. Just like my country, you can sing along with me if you want. Just like my country, I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. If you don't have education, your shot's gone. You've thrown it away. Goal 5, gender equality. Yeah. All right. Achieve gender equality and empower women and girls all over the world. End all forms of discrimination and violence against women. Yeah. As Malala Yousafzai says very beautifully and succinctly, that every girl in the world gets the right to education and has the same rights that all boys get. And make sure there's no more preference for boys when you're talking about what babies you want. Girls and boys should be equally valued. This is a great scandal in the world. And of course, make sure there's gender equity in the workplace where women get paid for the work they do, not just based on their gender. All right. If you permit me, I'll give you a Hamilton quote. You'll know this one. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And when I meet Thomas Jefferson, I'm going to compel him to include women in the sequel. All right. 6 is clean water and sanitation. We want universal access to clean, safe drinking water. Almost 2 billion people in the world today face contaminated drinking water. Almost 1 billion people do not have proper toilets or sanitation facilities. Again, a major grave scandal in the world today. 7 is affordable and clean energy. Affordable, reliable, sustainable modern energy sources. We want it from things like solar, wind, geothermal, water. We don't want it from oil or coal or gas or any of those things. They need to go. There's about 1 billion people in the world today don't have electricity. Almost 3 billion people have to rely on wood or other biomass for cooking. And what does that do? It leads to great pollutions and all kinds of dreadful respiratory problems. So this is a multidimensional problem when you don't have access to clean, affordable, reliable, sustainable energy. This is another form of deprivation. So when you're living on your knees, you rise up. Tell your brother that he's got to rise up. Tell your sister that she's got to rise up. Rise up. Rise up and defend these sustainable development goals because they're your goals. 8 is decent work and economic growth. Economic growth that benefits everybody, not just the top 1%. Are we good with that? Yes. This is about employment and decent work for all. There's about 200 million people in the world today that don't have a job. 75 million of those are young people who've never had a job and can't find a job. Work is not just about money and income. It's a fundamental source of human dignity. You get your human dignity through work and your social contribution. So again, to all the companies out there, don't put profits first, put work first. A civics lesson from a slaver. Hey neighbor, your debts are paid because you don't pay for labor. Let's pay for labor. Let's give decent work to everybody in the world. Goal 9. These are what I call the 3 I's. Resilient infrastructure, sustainable industrialization, and innovation. We want to build tomorrow's economy using the ingenuity and the skills and the talents of the young people. And that economy has to be strong, smart, fair, and sustainable. Okay, this is your task. Are you up for building this economy of tomorrow that everybody benefits from? Yes, all right. I'll give you another Hamilton quote. I'm past patiently waiting. I'm passionately smashing every expectation. Every action's an act of creation. I'm laughing in the face of casualties and sorrow. For the first time, I'm thinking past tomorrow. Think past tomorrow to the economy you want to build. Number 10 is a very important one. Reduced inequalities all across the world. Do you know that 8 very, very rich men, own as much wealth as half the people in the world? 8 men. And by the way, they're all men, in case you hadn't figured that out. 8 men own as much as half the world. In this country, in the United States, nearly all the income gained over the past 10 or 12 years have gone to the top 1%, right? So for most people are still in recession. Do we want a fairer world with lower inequality? Of course we do. Is it time for a Hamilton quote, do you think? For inequality, our poorest citizens, our farmers live ration to ration, while Wall Street robs them blind in search of chips to cash in. Some things haven't changed in 250 years. Now we're moving away from the kind of the fairness, decency dimension towards the sustainability and environmental justice dimension. Number 11 is make cities safe, resilient, and sustainable, and make sure everybody has affordable housing. By the way, that's a crucial issue right here in New York City, not just in the developing countries of the world. But again, almost 1 billion people in the world live in slums with dreadful, unsanitary living conditions and real problems with pollution. And that includes about half the people in Africa, by the way. Again, sustainable cities and communities is really, really important. And what I heard a lot this morning from you is all about how to make your cities more livable and more sustainable, more aesthetic, and all that stuff, and that's fantastic. But since we're talking about cities, sustainable cities, there's nothing rich folks love more than going downtown and slumming it with the poor. Let's get rid of slums so the rich people won't be able to do that anymore. No more slums. Number 12, sticking with sustainability, responsible consumption and production patterns, using your natural resources wisely and sustainability. This is what you were talking about, using responsible consumption and production within your communities, all these fantastic ideas. That's exactly what you're doing. By the way, what you're doing is trying to implement SDG 12, and you can tell people that. Number 13 is take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Now, you know this is one of your most important issues. We, as a world, are heading off a cliff. Droughts, floods, storms, fires. It's getting worse every year. The temperatures are rising every year. And you know, here's the worst part. The world's poorest people are suffering most from climate change. For them, these weather disruptions are a life and death issue. But they're also the people who have done least to contribute to it. You know, these carbon emissions that are poisoning our planet, the poorest 3 billion people in the world only contribute 5% of those emissions. The other 95% is coming from us, right here in these rich countries. That makes it a key issue of justice, a core issue of justice that we have to take responsibility for solving climate change. Are we going to do that? You want one more Hamilton quote? This is a more serious, sober quote that deals with this topic. We push away what we can never understand. We push away the unimaginable. Because for many people, what climate change can do to this world is truly unimaginable. And we as human beings don't like to think about the unimaginable, so we try and push it away, and we try to ignore it. We try to pretend it's not there. We try to pretend it doesn't exist. That's what's going on with climate change. But we have to deal with the unimaginable. We have to face it down, and we have to conquer it. Are we good with that? Yeah. All right. Number 14 is called Life Below Water. Conserve and sustainably use the oceans, the seas, and the marine resources. We need to stop the acidification of the oceans. We need to stop the destruction of the coral reefs. We need to stop overfishing. We need to stop pollution of the oceans. Are we good? Yeah. All right. Number 15 is life on land. Same issue here. Sustainably manage forests. Stop desertification. Stop land degradation. Stop biodiversity loss. We heard some of that this morning too. Protect our ecosystems like the rainforests, right? Like the Arctic, like the oceans. What is a legacy? What is a legacy? It's planting seeds in a garden you never get to see. And that's really important. We're doing this not just for us. We're doing this for the people who will come after us. Because the inheritance of this world, it's not just a legacy from your parents. It's a loan to your children and your grandchildren. You were entrusted to keep it and protect it and make it better for the people that will come after you. That's what a legacy is. 16 is peace, justice, and strong institutions. We want to reduce war, violence, conflict, human rights abuses, and horrible scourges like organized crime and human trafficking. These are awful scourges of the modern world that we need to get rid of. And of course, we know that if you don't solve the other problems, if you don't solve climate change, if you don't solve environmental degradation, if you don't have a fair and decent world, you will probably get violence, you will get refugees and migrants and disruption all over the world. So if you want peace, you need sustainable development. That is a core issue. And here's my last Hamilton quote, by the way, from King George. Because when push comes to shove, I will kill your friends and family to remind you of my love. Perfect, brilliant, brilliant. But we want the opposite of King George. We want sustainable development where we lift up and empower people, not put them down. And that brings me to the final SDG, which is a global partnership for sustainable development. Everybody has a role to play. The rich countries need to help the poor countries through aid. Government has a role to play. Business has a role to play. Civil society has a role to play. Religion has a role to play. You have a role to play. Because this is a core issue of right and wrong. Who's that? Pope Francis. Do we like Pope Francis? All right. Pope Francis says, what kind of world do we want to leave to those who will come after us, to children who are growing up? The SDGs answer that question. They say, Pope Francis, we want a fairer world, a more decent world, a safer world, a more sustainable world. Pope Francis also said, let us say no to an economy of exclusion and inequality where money rules rather than serves. That economy kills, that economy excludes, that economy destroys Mother Earth. We need to change course. Do we support this? Will we support this? This is not just a Catholic issue. Every religion supports this. I work with a group in the Vatican where we bring together the world's religions who unite on the importance of sustainable development. What you're looking at there, that's an Ayatollah from Iran, that's a Muslim, Sunni Muslim from Lebanon, and that's an Orthodox rabbi from Israel. They're all sitting together because they're all united on this issue of sustainable development and making a world a better place. This is something that people think that religions are divided. On this issue, I can guarantee you that they are united because this is so important. And there's another example. There's more religious leaders. We have Hindus, Buddhists, Catholics, Sikhs, Muslims, all united on this most important topic. And there, last October, November, in the Vatican, I attended the Youth Solutions for Sustainable Development. It's kind of what you did right here, but for college age kids. But very same idea, they came up with their solutions. And that's them all getting a photograph with the Pope right afterwards. And there's the Pope waving, and there's a better one. That's me with the Pope last year. What happens next depends on what you do with your lives. There's a million things I haven't done. Just you wait. Just you wait. These SDGs are supposed to go until 2030. We're supposed to have solved all these problems by 2030. How old will you be at 2030? 20-something. You'll be, all right, in the 20s. Will the SDGs have been met by the time you're in your 20s? And if not, what are you going to do about it? Because that's your time. That will be your time. In the year 2070, we're supposed to have phased out fossil fuels and have fully renewable energy. 2070, no more coal, no more oil, no more gas. How old will you be in 2070? So by 2070, and I know this is really hard for you to think about, but by 2070, you'll be on the verge of retiring. You'll have kids, you'll have grandkids, and then they'll ask you, Mom, Dad, what kind of world did you leave behind for me? So you need to think about that right now, because by 2070, we're supposed to have solved climate change. Are you ready for that? Are you going to throw away your shot? I hope not, because unfortunately, many of the people who came before you did throw away their shot. The SDGs are your goals. They're your generation's agenda. You have to take them, run with them, implement them, and win with them. Do not make the mistakes of the past. My final line to you is this. I know that we can win. I know that greatness lies in you. But remember, from here on in, history has its eyes on you. Thank you very much. All right, SDGs.